Okay, thank you very much. I'm very glad to be here. The aim of my talk is to present some recent changes that have taken place in the Italian mafias, in particular in the use of violence and killings. In recent years, there have been significant changes in the use of violence with a sharp reduction in killings. I will try to explain this, why this happened, discussing some hypotheses. Before doing this, I want to start with the two puzzling questions about the use of violence and killings in the history of mafias. The first one is, why do some mafias commit more killings than others? And why do some mafias kill high-profile people? High-profile people is a specific subset of the total amount of killings committed by mafias that is composed of people with their private or public action can create serious problems to the life, the business, and the security of these criminal organizations. So they have to cope with them, sometimes killing them. They are prosecutors, judges, people from law enforcement agencies, politicians, of course, not in collusion with mafiosi, journalists, priests, and in the past also trade unionists. So this is the first puzzling question. The second one is the opposite. Why have Italian mafias stopped using violence, in particular, killing each other, and most importantly, killing high-profile people? My hypothesis is that there is a relationship between the different strategies that mafias try to achieve over time, the different organizational structures that Italian mafias assume over time, and the use of violence and killings. In my talk, I'm going to refer to these three Italian mafias: the Campanian mafia, the Camorra, the Sicilian Cosa Nostra, and with an unpronounceable name, the 'Ndrangheta, the Calabrian mafia, probably the most important, the most powerful mafia now. Mafia organizations take many different forms. I'm going to describe how mafias, Italian mafias, are organized, just to give you an idea of the kind of organization we are looking at. So, in mafias, we can distinguish two different levels. The first level is the minimal organizational unit that assumes different names in different mafias. Family in Sicilian Cosa Nostra, clan in the Camorra, Ndrina and 'Ndrangheta. And this basic organizational unit is hierarchically based, with a boss in command and up to 3 or 4 subordinate levels. And this is the government dimension. Each family controls a specific territorial area. Some mafias develop over time what I named the higher levels coordinating bodies. And this is the second level. This is the governance dimension, meaning that these subordinate levels do not command and control the families, because the autonomy of the families is sacred. So the main functions of these levels, of the higher levels coordinating bodies, is to coordinate the entire criminal system, to make a unitary strategy, but in particular to settle disputes, to solve problems, to control violence, and of course to exploit business opportunity. This is very famous. This is a typical organizational chart of the Sicilian Cosa Nostra. There is one boss, some boss of 10 or capo di cine, captain, the soldiers, and finally the associates that are not made members because they didn't do the ritual of initiation. And there are one or more advisors and one underboss that in Sicilian Cosa Nostra is in staff position, in American Cosa Nostra is in buffer position. This distinction depends on the different size of these families. Sicilian Cosa Nostra developed higher levels coordinating bodies in 1957 and in 1975. Can you see this pointer? Yes. 3 or more families in adjoining territories form a district that is called mandamento, a district. And this district is presided by a boss. In the province of Palermo, that is the core of the Sicilian Cosa Nostra, because there are more than 50% of the entire criminal system, so the total amount of families operating in Sicily, there is this provincial level that is formed by all the bosses, all the mandamento bosses. In the other provinces, for example, in Trapani, we have the families, the district, and one referent for the entire province. And in Catania and other provinces, we have only families and one referent for the entire province. All referents form the cupola or regional commission that is the highest level coordinating body. But it's important to say that this level, this provincial level in Palermo, is was the most important coordinating body in the history of Sicilian Cosa Nostra. This is the typical organizational structure of the 'Ndrangheta. The 'Ndrine are the cells of the 'Ndrangheta, and this basic organizational level is composed by family members that are related by blood ties and marriages, a true endogamy. Several 'Ndrine form the locale, the place, an association of families that operate in the same territorial district. Locale is divided in two compartments for reasons of security. The junior members in minor society, they have less power and less money, and the senior members in major society, including the officers of the locale, the managers of the locale, the boss, the bookkeeper, meaning the accountant, and so on. Seniority in the 'Ndrangheta is measured in doti, meaning qualities of a gift, which are the ranks of in the organization's membership. And there are many different ranks, from Santista to Padrino, meaning Godfather. 'Ndrangheta established in 1991 higher levels coordinating bodies. This structure is quite complex, but it's important to say that we are talking about the 'Ndrangheta in Reggio Calabria. Reggio Calabria is the core of the Calabrian mafia. And the Reggio Calabria 'Ndrangheta developed this very complex organizational structure that is characterized by 3 different districts, Ionian, Central, and Tyrrhenian, that coordinate many different locali and many different districts and many different 'Ndrine. And these 3 districts form the province or crime that is the highest level coordinating body. And there is one crime boss that, but it's important to say that this is not an organization in which the power cascades down from the top. The crime boss is an arbitrator, an expert of procedures and rituals, not a governing boss, not the boss of the bosses. He has responsibilities in procedures and politics, not in business, because the autonomy of the families is sacred. And there are many different branches in different regions in Italy, in Lombardy, in Piedmont, in Liguria, in other countries, in Europe, and in the world. In Australia, in Canada, probably in other places that we don't know now. And these branches are strictly linked with the province or crime. Finally, the Camorra. There are at least 160 clans operating in Campania. It's quite difficult to distinguish just one organizational model able to represent the entire criminal system. So I think there are 3 different models. The first one is what I call clan with low-medium level of structuring. These criminal groups, mainly present in the city of Naples, are characterized by a low level of organizational formalization and a low level of division of labor. The average age of members is low, and they tend to use violence very, very often. The second model is characterized by historical families. such as Contini, Di Lauro, Licciardi, Mallardo. There are 16 historical families in the Camorra, and these families are characterized by long tradition, high level of organizational formalization. And finally, so these families can create some alliances and the cartel. For example, the Secondigliano Alliance, the Mazzarella Cartel, and others. Finally, there is one federation that was formed by 3 families and 10 allied clans, the Casalesi Cartel. And this federation operates in the province, in the territory of Caserta. This is a work in progress. I'm trying to quantify the different organizational models. At the moment, we can say that the 84% of this criminal system is composed by clan with a low-medium level of structuring. The 10% is represented by historical families, and the 6% by Casalesi clan. So I identify 2 different organizational orders, vertical and horizontal. Vertical order that is characterized by the presence of higher levels of coordination, and the main organizational logic is collusion among clans. And the horizontal organizational model that is characterized by the absence of higher levels coordinating bodies, and the main organizational logic is competition among clans. What I argue is that the type of organizational order, vertical or horizontal, is related to the nature and the frequency of killings. The formation of higher levels of coordination makes it possible to control violence. Why? Because there are many different levels in which it's possible to settle disputes and to control violence. Many possible sit-down situations. For example, I hope you can see my pointer. For example, if there is some conflicts, some problems between these 2 families, they can go to the boss. Or if there are some problems between these 2 families, they can go at the provincial level or at the regional level. So many different levels. The problem is really important because, as you know, mafia organizations cannot resort to the court. So they have to solve problems by themselves. In this case, there are many different levels in which it's possible to settle disputes. In the horizontal model, it's quite impossible due to the absence of these higher levels coordinating bodies. And so it's this absence makes it impossible for the conflicts to be negotiated and managed in non-violent manner within the organization. At the same time, mafias characterized by the presence of higher levels coordinating bodies are more able to identify the enemy outside the organization. The mafias characterized by an horizontal model are unable to do this because for one clan, for example, the main enemy of this clan is the closest clan, not the prosecutor that is investigating on the clan. So this is a total number of killings of the 3 mafias in the period 1983 to 2018. As you can see from this graph, the Camorra killed the greater part of people, committed the greater part of killings, and on average, in Sicilian Cosa Nostra, the number of killings per year is 48, 41 for the 'Ndrangheta, and 87 for the Camorra. So we can say that mafias, based on vertical order, are characterized by a lower number of killings. The more organized and structured a mafia is, the lower the number of killings is. And the same for the Camorra, because we said that there are 3 or 4 different models in the Camorra system, and the greater number of killings were committed by these clans characterized by a low-medium level of structuring. For example, the Casalesi cartel in the period 2000, 2015, no, sorry, 2000, 2005, killed only one person, and probably not for mafia reasons. So there is a strict relationship between competition and the use of violence, collusion, less violence. Moving now to the high-profile killings, prosecutors, judges, journalists, and so on, I collected original data from the second part of the 18th century until now. And as you can see from this graph, Cosa Nostra killed the greater part of high-profile people. Camorra, only in brackets, 49. More than the 70% of these killings, 33 people, were killed by Camorra in only 8 years, from 1975 to 1983, when Camorra was organized in a vertical way during the Raffaele Cutolo leadership. So 33 people on 49 killed in only 8 years. The 'Ndrangheta, this is an anomaly because we should expect a greater number of killings in the 'Ndrangheta, but I'm going to explain this very, very soon. And this is an articulation of the different types of high-profile killings. Sicilian Cosa Nostra killed 15 magistrates. Almost the total of these magistrates were killed after the constitution of higher levels coordinating bodies, also for law enforcement agencies, officials pertaining to institutions, politicians, of course, not in collusion with mafiosi. And only trade unionists were killed, the greater part of trade unionists were killed before the constitution of higher levels coordinating bodies, because this was related to a specific land reform that characterized Italy after the Second World. Because mafiosi, Sicilian Cosa Nostra mafiosi, provide protection for land owners. And so they were in competition with the trade unionists. The Camorra, 0, no magistrates, and 'Ndrangheta only 3, and so, okay. So, to conclude the first puzzling question, we can say that mafias based on a vertical order tend to kill less compared to mafia based on horizontal order. And at the same time, mafias based on vertical order can tend to kill more high-profile people. But the 'Ndrangheta, there is an anomaly. Why did the 'Ndrangheta kill so few high-profile people? Because we should have a higher number of high-profile killings. I think there are two main reasons. The first one is that the 'Ndrangheta established higher levels, the 'Ndrangheta in Reggio Calabria, established higher levels coordinating bodies very late. In the 1991, just a year before the strong repression by the Italian state that started in 1992-1993, after the killings of Giovanni Falcone and Borsellino. And after this, all mafias, all Italian mafias, stopped to killing high-profile people because the cost of doing this was too high compared to the benefits. The second reason is that for much of its history, the 'Ndrangheta has been the odd mafia out. So the 'Ndrangheta benefited by no consistent public attention because it was considered as a sort of rural banditry. So consider that it has taken several decades for investigators, scholars, law enforcement agencies to start to focus on the 'Ndrangheta's international expansion. So in other words, we can say that the 'Ndranghetisti didn't kill so many high-profile people because they didn't need to kill them. But second puzzling questions, why don't they kill anymore, in particular high-profile killings? Because there was a significant decrease in the number of homicides over time. This is a work in progress. This is the second part. I'm working on this. as you can see, there was a strong decrease in killings. In particular, for example, in Cosa Nostra, in the period, a decrease of 50% in the decade 1993 to 2002, and a further 77% in the following decade, 2003-2012. In the same period, for the 'Ndrangheta, a decrease of 53% and 31%, and for the Camorra, a decrease of 34 and 35%. Consider that in 2 years, the Camorra killed only in brackets, 16 people. It's quite unusual for the history of the Camorra. So why don't they kill anymore? I think, my hypothesis, there is a mix of external and internal factors that can contribute to explain this. External factors. First of all, the effectiveness of a state response by the state after the killings of Falcone and Borsellino in 1992. From a quantitative point of view, the many mafiosi were convicted to life imprisonment. Consider that in the 80s, in Italy, there was an important trial called the Maxi Processo, the big trial. And one of the outcomes of this big trial was that 19 mafiosi were convicted to life imprisonment, only 19. And this was considered as the most important trial against Sicilian Cosa Nostra. In the same period, in the period from 1992 to 2006, more than 450 sentences to life imprisonment in Palermo, probably more than for the same person. But the total amount of these sentences is really important. So strong reaction from a quantitative point of view. But at the same time, strong reaction by the state from a qualitative point of view, because all high-ranking members of the Sicilian Cosa Nostra were arrested, they are in jail now. And the Sicilian Cosa Nostra dissolved the highest level coordinating body, the Cupola, in 1993, and after the provincial level. So now we have only families and mandamenti. They are trying to re-establish this provincial level, but they are coping with very strong difficulties. At the same time, more than 200 municipal and provincial councils have been dissolved in recent decades because of mafia infiltration in Italy, not all, in different regions in Italy. Very important, new laws against mafia business. The financial drain was heavy. The importance of cooperating witnesses, this growing number of cooperating witnesses. And finally, very important, the reaction against mafia by the civil society with the birth of many anti-mafia movements and associations. One of Giovanni Falcone's killers said that Falcone, the prosecutor Falcone, has done more damage dead than alive, meaning that Sicilian Cosa Nostra made a strategic mistake in killing Giovanni Falcone, because they didn't take in account the strong reaction by the Italian state. But at the same time, there are some internal dynamics that characterize these changes. In particular, in the Camorra, the most violent Italian mafias, this movement from competition to collusion. According to recent investigations, there are 2 important cartels operating in Naples and in Campania. The Secondigliano Alliance, that is an historic alliance, that formed by 3 families, Licciardo, Mallardo, Contini, and Bosti, that is one of the Contini, is a member of Contini family. And this alliance operates in red areas, in Pianura, Chiaiano, Arenella, and another smaller cartel, the Mazzarella cartel, that operates in this area. But the novelty is that there is this area in which the cartels operate in peaceful coexistence. And this is a novelty in the history of the Camorra. At the provincial level, as you can see, in the red area, there is the Secondigliano alliance. In orange, there are, sorry for the quality of this picture, unfortunately, I couldn't be able to find better. In the orange area, there are many different cartels that operate in strictly connection with the Mazzarella, the Secondigliano alliance, sorry. And only in this area, there are some autonomous groups that operates in peaceful coexistence with Secondigliano alliance. So an increasing level of coordination with the polarization between two cartels, two dominant cartels, and this peaceful coexistence among clans. And regarding, for example, the Casalesi cartel that operates in the province of Caserta, the boss, Pasquale Zagaria, said it's important for the cartel to have the smallest possible level of social visibility, meaning that the use of violence, killing people, and so on, could be very, very dangerous for the life, the business, and the security of these criminal organizations. So, moving now to the conclusion, I think there is a mix of external factors that can explain this second puzzling question, a mix of external factors, strong repression and the growth of anti-mafia efforts, and some internal factors, in particular in the Camorra, with this movement from competition to collusion and this peaceful coexistence. This reduction in the number of killings means that in this specific historical moment, resorting to this particular method to resolve disputes seems to offer more disadvantages than advantages. To conclude, I think it's important to understand the criminal behavior, mafia behavior. It's important to analyze the structure, the organization of the different organizational structures that mafias assume over time, not only from a static point of view, but in particular from a dynamic point of view. Thank you very much for your attention.